Доброго ранку усім.
Good morning, everyone who are here and who watch us online. We continue our work at Ukraine Crisis Media Center, and the topic for discussion is freedom of opinion and expression during the conflict times. And this discussion is organized by Ukraine Freedom, implemented by Partners for Digital Rights Defenders, supported by Lawyers Association of US, and the freedom of opinion and expression is one of the most discussed topics. And taking into account the war that is ongoing and the right for freedom of speech on the internet and the right to spread the information should be taken into consideration while speaking about the defense issues. And also we see that the number of limitations increases. So the country implement all the measures to defend itself and to defend its interests. But the matter is whether all these measures are really proportional, and does the state take into account the opinion of civil society? So we have guests who represent different groups of interest who will help to comprehensively discuss this problem. So we have our guests Olga Kyrylyuk, Ph.D. in law, co-founder and managing partner at the NGO Partners for Digital Rights Defenders. From the state, we have the representative Oleksandr Tsaruk, Ph.D. in economics, internet governance expert, representative of Ukraine at the Government Advisory Committee, Vyacheslav Redko, executive director at the Donetsk regional branch of Ukrainian League of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, head of the NGO Progressive Reforms Support Association, Serhii Tomilenko, chairman at the National Union of Journalists of Ukraine, and civil society representative Vladimir Tryukhan, chairman at the Public Council Committee under the Ministry of Information Policy of Ukraine. So the first question we want to start our discussion with is, how do you assess the defense of freedom of opinion and expression, taking into account the circumstances we face? 3 minutes each. The floor is given to Olga. Thank you, Maria. Today, freedom of opinion and expression is in difficult condition. It needs a proper mechanism of protection, because we see that now there are some limitations provided by the state, and especially concerning internet. Due to the internet, now they provide maximum information at high speed, and in order to defend ourselves from the external foreign influence, our state does everything possible to do this. They do not provide national content at a proper level, and this content should be brought as also to the international public. And the state starts to limit its information field, and these actions made in the interests of national security. But we believe that we should not oppose freedom of opinion and defense. And the country is now in difficult situation, but we should find right proportion to combine those two values for the state. So while searching for defense of the values, we should not lose these values in the process. So the question is now to Vladimir Tryukhan. So your opinion on this matter, please. Thank you. So we live in special period, and the war is against Ukraine, and in our legislation we see a lot of different interpretations. And in some provisions of the Supreme Council, in some speeches of the leaders of the state, they say that this is aggression of Russia against Ukraine, but de jure we have anti-terror operation, and there is no war on the whole. So this is a war, and the military experts, and not only military experts, but also other experts, call it hybrid war. This is a war at different levels, and the information component is the most dangerous for Ukraine. Why? Because through information attacks, through propaganda, Russian Federation wins brains, wins souls of our people, and success of this information campaign, it led to to the annexation of Crimea, to occupation, and to the war in Donbass. And in this situation, Ukraine as a state should defend itself and should make a counteroffensive, and we should fight in the territory of the enemy. But a lot of citizens of Ukraine, they use the situation in the sphere of information. There is no punishment for harming the interests of Ukraine, and some people play in the interests of Russian Federation, and they say that in Ukraine there is junta and there is no proper state, and in this way they promote Russian propaganda and promote fake understanding in Russian Federation and among people who watch Russian channels in foreign countries, and they create such a state that does not exist. And for Ukrainian state, there should be freedom of opinion and expression, but there should be legal preventive measures in order to prevent disinformation, and in order that people not to create this image of state that is not does not exist. I would like to say about other aspects. Now we have processes that are ongoing. We have rights that are guaranteed by international and national legislation, according to which our citizens, in the interest of the state and in their own interest, they use this right. We cannot say that there are limitations of freedom of opinion and expression. We have actions, meetings, or actions of support that are ongoing in the liberal part of and in the governmental area, and there is a and Francis Fukuyama, in his work on the basis of power and its decay, he said he made such a conclusion that countries that have underdeveloped institutes of democracy but active and strong socially mobile groups, they are destined to live in political instability. These are actions of protests, quick change of governments, early elections, re-elections, impeachments, and other things. And what I wanted to say is that Ukraine needs to think in what way it will develop institutions that are the basis of success of the state, at the international arena and its stability to foreign and domestic threats. And I would like to ask what institutions can be developed the fastest in order to be more sustainable and pose those threats that we face. What resources do we have? Information resources, military, economic, diplomatic, and other resources that will allow us to be stronger in the information field. Thank you. Thank you. Serhii Tomilenko, please.
Колеги, я представляю журналістів, я очолюю.
Thank you, dear colleagues. I'm head of the National Union of Ukrainian Journalists, and I would like to extend it today. These discussions which we held in Ukraine, they are also debated in Europe and on the platform of the OSCE conference as well on sustainable development. In particular, OSCE representative on freedom of mass media, Oleksandr, he also accented that we are now conducting discussions in Ukraine on the right of expression and opinion, and the debates are everywhere, overall Ukraine. And Ukrainian media and Ukrainian journalists, they feel difficulties here because we do not see our governmental officials be ready to this and to the defense on the threat to national security of Ukraine. And we see the limitations for journalists, for mass media. There are some cases of searches and use of force and searches in the editorial of mass media and serious accusations in treason and also publications in Ukrainian Pravda and other famous mass media where accusations and allegations are published that our law enforcement officers they saw that the state secrets were disclosed 6 months or some other time ago. Any use of force or any gunman of law enforcement, this is an extraordinary situation, and then responsible authorities, representatives should come and they should give us explanations that they found this form for the sake of the national security of Ukraine, but they should appear in the newsroom, but we do not see such debates here. That's why we can say that it is speculations on national defense issues. And this provoke the feel of make us alarm, and law enforcement officers should appear and report to us in the system of authorities in the time of conflicts, and today it should demonstrate that they are inclined to protect the rights of journalists. So when the rights of journalists are compromised, then people should know that officials protect them. And we also are talking about impunity. And so the right of expression of journalists is compromised. We recognize the state has the right to protect national security, national interests, but they also have a duty to report to the society for the use of force, which they are empowered to use. Thank you, Mr. Vyacheslav, and what is your opinion? First of all, the discussions like this at this platform, which provides us this chance, your Ukraine Crisis Media Center, which is 4 years old as far as I remember, I'd like to say that I would like to oppose the journalists as a consumer of content on the internet. Even advanced users on the internet, they could hardly understand who is an official journalist and empowered and have authority to speak. Many people, they just try to cover, to hide under the title of a journalist, but they are not. So there should be some classification, some statuses should be provided to people that they have the right to voice out their opinions as journalists. Then your image would be better among the population, I mean journalists. Maybe our country has never been in such complicated circumstances like today, the circumstances of war, when we should be balanced and we should differentiate information flows. The word is the strongest weapons on earth, and when on internet we have now such speed that information gets the other part of the planet in a moment via PCs. In 1940s, 1950s, one newspaper circulation around the country, it was the mean of impact on minds. So these days it is very easy to launch information flows, but it is very hard to control such flows. I think that we lose this information war, and very many volunteers. I had a talk at 1:00 a.m. this night. The team of volunteers have made a documentary about the situation in Donbass, but they do not have resources, they do not have money to translate this documentary and to launch this information all over the world to foreign countries. So the state should find money to translate this film. We have the right, according to the Constitution, for broadcasting of information, and no limitations can be applicable. So on the other hand, look what the result was from Odnoklassniki resource, Russian resource. The limitations were imposed on it. I don't know whether it is right, but the feeling is sought today. We should be very careful in our actions. We want you to use this platform for foreigners to get objective information, unbiased information about what is happening in Ukraine, in particular in the east of the country. Because Russian media tools, Russian specialists, they are ahead of us, unfortunately. I need that Mr. Vadym should leave us now. Mr. Serhii should leave us. Well, discussing this issue, we get the next issues where the right for expression and the national security are controversial, or it is possible to voice out someone's opinion, and the national security could be also defended at the same time. I would like to listen to your opinions, several of you, because we are in war for 3 years, and the ban on Russian mass media sources, of course, make people furious, but now we see that one Ukrainian, he is in jail in Russia, in Rostov city, just for visiting Russia and voicing out his opinion. Well, Mr. Vadym, we would like to give you the floor. Where is the balance? Well, I do not keep to a very strict stand. I think To the contrary, in the war, we should not be like ostriches when our heads are under the sand. We should know what is happening in the world. The pose of ostrich which our state keeps, it interferes with the national interests of Ukraine. Asymmetric methods are used. We do not have such large resources as Russia has, but we should protect our country, and we should fight for minds of Russians, because 2 million of citizens of Russia, they believe they are Ukrainians by origin, and previous census demonstrated that there are 10 millions of Ukrainians living in Russia. So now 5 times less people in Russia identify themselves as Ukrainians. So in the circumstances of this propaganda, they are just afraid to demonstrate that they are Ukrainians and to identify themselves as Ukrainians by origin. In Russian Federation, there is 140 million people living, and Russia is a contender for the world leadership. According to different censuses, there are up to 4 million of Ukrainians, or minimum 2.5 million of Ukrainians are visitors to Russia, citizens of Ukraine. So, and they also watch Russian talk shows being in Russia. And our state, Ukrainian state, do not coordinate experts or efforts who try to publish articles in such mixed media sources which are watched or read in Russia. I visit Russian talk shows, and I know that Karasyov, Yakhno, Sokolovskaya, they also visit Russia to take part in talk shows. We are like very brave persons, like Don Quixote of but this is the state who should coordinate our experts' offers, efforts. When Russia Today and other mass media channels of Russia, they have huge budgets, like several $100,000 or $1 million. Our TV channels do not have such budgets, so acting asymmetrically, coordinating the experts' efforts, still we can achieve some success in this information war. Your question was provocative and sensitive. It is vulnerable to us when the freedom of expression and opinion cannot be an absolute, because there is such a notion as the national security and the informational security. The answer is very simple. Everything which is compliant with the Ukrainian legislation, it is for the national interests of Ukraine. All the rest is not, but legislature is late in defining the threats to national security and informational plane, but we should not stop here. Civil society, journalists, journalist associations should propose to the government that this sphere also should be legislated. As my colleague said, that some special law enforcement officers come to TV channels premises, and the next day they even forget about this. But So this sphere is not regulated by the legislative provisions, even in this situation when the information area is not legalized. We should keep to the legislation. If a person at News One or other TV channels says some facts which are not true, the investigation should start, but not special enforcement officers should come to his or her office. So we should just prevent voicing out untrue facts. So now we have no power in this field. There are some people who come to Russia, say some things against Ukraine, and then return to Ukraine after such appearances at Russian channels, who previously even said this declarations against Ukraine. Our mass media, they avoid talking on this topic. How in Russian Federation and their information space, who are the agents of influence in Ukraine? Who are those citizens of Ukraine who help Russia in this war? Please, journalists, take interviews. Do not be afraid of this topic. When I was on the way to this briefing, I was reading the Express mass media, which has 450,000 audience, and they published an article about no war meeting in St. Petersburg. Thank you.
Thank you, Vadym. I have a lot of questions to you, but I will voice them later. Now I would like to hear from Olga about the golden mean between national security and freedom of opinion and expression. I believe that we should call things by their names. When we say that we have a foreign threat and there is war, but officially, as Vadym said, that we carry out ATO and all the measures implemented by the state and limitations that were adopted, they are grounded on the fact that the country is in war. But in order to implement the measures, we should clearly characterize the situation our country faces. And then for each citizen and for civil society and for expert community, there will be clear understanding why these legislative changes and regulations are adopted. We should remember about the principles of proportionality when we implement measures, and if some measures are taken in delay, as blocking of internet resources when war was ongoing for 3 years, and in 3 years we understood that these resources are in some way harmful, and this limitation is not communicated to society in a correct way. And this brings some concern from the audience when you use the resource and you get accustomed to it. And these limitations are really easy to overcome if you have some skills of using the internet and you know these programs that you can install in order to continue to use these resources, because for many people this is the matter of comfort. And if we forbid Yandex and you can find the same information on Google, so the question is whether this measure was efficient and whether we had to pose the society, and there are groups of people with opposing views, and some people believe that national security should prevail, and others believe that, yes, freedom of opinion expression should not be limited. So if there is an emergency state or martial law, then that would be more acceptable. But we continue to live in conditions of military conflict, but it appears that we use the same legislation that is used in peaceful time. The matter is why the state carry out such policy, why the state does not address civil society, why the opinion of international organization is not taken into account, because some limitations do not correspond to international standards. And when these limitations are adopted and the policy in Russia continues, and we blame this policy for these limitations, but we do the same limitations here in Ukraine. So where is the logic in what is going on? And now Serhii is given the floor about the balance. Dear colleagues, speaking about balance, I would like to go back to the issue that many journalists and whether we should regulate activity. The journalists, they should not be at the front line of regulation, and they shouldn't search for the agents of Kremlin or pseudo-journalists. We should adhere to professional standards. This is journalists' ethics, and for us, whether journalist is offline or online, they should all adhere to professional ethics code, and the materials should be objective and in the interest of the audience. And the new media, they simplify things and reinforce competition among journalists and active citizens who use the media, and this brings easier access to media field. And if a person wanted to express himself, he should have written letters to the media outlets. But now we have social networks that create the media, and everyone is the user, and each user can generate a content, and the generation of the content by citizens do not make them all journalists. And I would like to say that now we study the phenomenon of social media and the dissemination of information. There should be proper responsibility of the civil servants and politicians. And now we are there is a situation of abuse of this media area, and not only opposition politicians or those we believe that those who are in pro-government coalition, in Grushevsky, in the cabinet of ministers, or in the Supreme Council, they have their own fan clubs. They grow them, and whether it is done through money or with the use of bots, or this is conscious people, they instigate conflict, and journalists also provide sensitive topics, and they want to adhere to standards. And now we have a discussion about the division that this journalist is not patriotic enough, and this loves Ukraine, but in a different way. And this discussion is promoted not only in society with those who really care about Ukraine, but also there are political technologists, separate politicians who defend one or another official or party, and they create conflict, they generate hate speech, and it is generated in some interests. And the sites like Mirotvorets, Parasite, and in the when Mirotvorets was started, they found so if a person evidently is a separatist or terrorist, maybe they are fighting against Ukraine, so we put this information as a catalog of such terrorists. And in society, in war, they believe that there should be a catalog of those people who evidently are suspected in this. But then files about foreign and domestic journalists were provided, those who tried to bring information from the occupied Donetsk, and their materials are not anti-Ukrainian. And there is an issue, and there is another site, and there is a scan of passport and the place of residence. For example, the editor of Ukraine channel, her address, the number of her flat, and the number of her telephone number, and the representative of the ministry comes up, and they should reduce the number of potential crimes, but he says that I am a volunteer of the site and I bring the information to them. So in our society that acts in the times of conflict and this emotional situation, what can the activist do in such a situation? He can come to this flat and he can greet this journalist, and she provided some information in 2014 or 2015 to the, and they wanted to get a comment from one village or the other. So this is professional work of the journalists to search for information, and people should not be punished for their profession. And so this is unacceptable, and we believe that we should teach our officials, and we should adhere and hear the advice of OSCE and American Association of Journalists, and we shouldn't invent some things. So the Reporters Without Borders and the American Committee, they defended people in different countries, and now that they say about facts of defending journalists, maybe some things went wrong in Kiev, not in these respectable institutions.
Serhii, can you tell us how you do classify a person by professional feature that he is a journalist? Does he or she should she or he have some diploma, or just be a member of some community? There is not strict classification. It is unavailable in the world. We can't say 100% who is who, but according to the legislation of Ukraine, journalists are workers, staff of registered mass media sources, such as news agencies, TV channels, and printed mass media sources, online mass media sources, can register as information as news agencies, so they also can issue such certificates to journalists of their status. The other group are members of professional associations, journalistic associations in particular, members of National Union of Journalists of Ukraine. They also can tell that they have this professional status as concerns other people and bloggers talking like experts. We can say that if they produce media content, but at the same time they are ready to voice out their opinions on public, then we can confirm that they keep to journalists' ethics. This is not 300 pages of some code of ethics, but this is elementary declarations, like statements like in a Bible. This information is checked by us, and upon verification, when these people, they could be named journalists. Mr. Oleksandr, is it possible to balance national security interests and the interests of the right of expression and opinion? I would like to finalize this discussion, my speech on this discussion, to the contrast of what was said by journalists today and my civil society colleagues. How many journalists have been excluded from professional associations? Do they have any system of consideration of ethics violations, journalist ethics violation? Are these processes public? Maybe some journalists, they should be excluded from professional associations. This could be also an element of pressure on journalists. On the other hand, allegations against the state, this state fails to act, the state is doing what is provided by the law. If we need to improve the legislation, we should draft this strategy in what direction we are going to transform the legislation. And people who are responsible for protection of the law provisions, their police officers and authorities, why we do not have balance? Why we do not have skills to counteract these threats we are talking about today? Many actions, many steps are taken to protect the right of speech and expression, and they are connected with the dissemination of information. And unique cases like today, which Ukraine experienced today, no other country in the world is experiencing. Ukrainian journalists, bloggers are invited all over the world to share their best practices. Prominent, well-known organizations and conventions which have been signed 100 years ago, these issues, they are not adapted to the speed with which information is disseminated. It is disseminated at the speed of light. The structure of seeking for balance is obsolete. We can propose unique solution or lose this war. The decision to find multi-sided dialogue and to develop solutions to way out from this challenge. The challenge Ukraine is experiencing, this is a managerial challenge, whether we can find the system of anti-crisis management of the state, society, and then economy after that, and our social consciousness, and whether we would survive in this opposition. We need multi-sided institutions of developing solutions. There are some cliches. Multi-stakeholder solutions could be our strengths, our know-how, and other states may learn from others' best practices if they experience similar difficulties. As concerns anti-corruption efforts, Ukraine is #1. Many countries are interested in using our methods of combating corruption. But all these efforts could be used against us as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Vyacheslav. What is your opinion about the golden solution? Where is the balance between national security and the right for expression? I I'm thankful to Serhii for his comment, and I will now answer you where the golden mean is. In this discussion, I would like to support Olga's opinion to find the golden mean. We need first to have right classification, but we lack correct classification so far. I agree with Vadym that the ostrich posture is not our stand. We should not keep to it. In my opinion, I think that civil society, I know Oleksandr, Olga, they are members of associations and which associated events all over Ukraine to demonstrate, to explain to Ukrainian citizens this problem. Unfortunately, state authorities lose in this area. But to create the platform where civil society and authorities can appear, where they can find this balance and this golden mean, we should do this. On the other hand, there is a proverb that although something will be forbidden, but anyway, this forbidden sins will invoke more interest. The proverb is forbidden fruit is sweet. So we can enter international arena via the chance for our content, our TV content, to be demonstrated in foreign hotels. For example, when you come to some other country, when you visit some country, you watch their TV channels, you see that there is anti-Ukrainian propaganda on these TV channels, and even Ukrainians visiting foreign countries, they start to doubt whether they understand what is happening in Ukraine in the right way. So whether the society is ready for the discussion, fruitful discussion between the civil society and the authorities. Now I offer to start the next block of our discussion. We have already legislative limitations imposed on the opinion and expression right, freedom of opinion and expression right, but there is also the draft law on this issue. What should we do to preserve our freedom of speech on the internet? We hear some statements even today that Ukraine is in the posture of ostrich. I would like to listen to your opinions. So who is ready to answer? Not about the draft law, but about the methodology, about the recent innovations on the security of using internet, blocking of some internet websites. 200 years ago, when the military hostilities took place, there were hospitals in place, and how the surgeons worked. They just cut off some extremities if there are inflammations. Technologies during this time improved. When there is some inflammation, we can use antibiotics, and the person will preserve his or her extremities. We have the same in legislative controversies. We should not use obsolete methods of fight. They are efficient methods, but not the most efficient ones and justifiable. We should learn to find more efficient ways, including blocking of some internet content. Engineers and even students know that if you block something on the internet, you can get it on the darknet or in some other reality. Our world is so advanced now that we can't prevent some information from dissemination. There are economic ways and other ways of information dissemination. I would like to give an example of gambling business in the USA. It is banned almost everywhere besides several jurisdictions, and it is not banned online. All gambling businesses in the world, they do not have USA license, but according to their targeting and the client identity, payment card of US card, the transactions are blocked because they do not want to become to be the clients of the US court system. Those who do not block this access to payment cards, they are clients of Ukrainian justice system. This is the economic method of economic sanctions which are applicable. Ukrainian president also applied such actions to some businesses who provide services on the territory of Ukraine, including some of them, they are not registered as Ukrainian entities and they did not pay taxes. Why? There were no court trials. What for? Al Capone was in jail for not paying taxes. So we should have legislation in place on economic sanctions. If some economic entity of neighboring country or offshore jurisdiction is operating in cyberspace of Ukraine, then this entity should be a client of Ukrainian justice system. This would ruin economically this model of influence and outflow of information from Ukraine or inflow of not acceptable content towards Ukraine. Then these entities would think whether they would inflow this content into Ukraine, if this is punishable. What do you think? This content which invoke outrage, what should we do if we do not block it? They are not blocked yet. This is the case. So it is impossible to get these resources from any PC. No, you are not right. We can access them from any PCs. Just there is one obstacle. Yes, it impedes access. This action, this step, it is similar to cutting off one finger. The efficiency decreased and penetration of information disseminated via this resource, it decreased. The action was efficient but not as much as other steps could be. If you want to get something, to get some information from internet, it is accessible anyway. The question is whether it is available at every internet page. If it is possible, I would like to voice out opinion of the Association of Ukrainian Journalists about the draft law about regulating cyberspace or potential ban on content. We support the media society and NGOs and information security NGOs. The politicians and officials should be honest. They should appear at debates and keep to their stance and force out their stance, because now they avoid public discussions. They try to be hidden behind some mottos, and they put into the draft law such features which will allow them to ban any mass media source. No, let's not speak about some ideal state, some ideal democracy. We are saying that the people are medium of power, but power is in hands of some specific individuals. And talking about anti-corruption, leaders should demonstrate combating corruption, but we are not talking that we are leaders in the anti-corruption efforts. We are leaders in demonstrating that we are doing anti-corruption efforts. Let's look at the practices in Ukraine. Let's discuss reactions, responses of our officials, our civil servants, for example, application of force against radio freedom staff, and we saw how General Prosecutor's son Vadym took place, and we saw also the law enforcement officers' behavior at that moment. We should be ashamed when we saw on video how this state guards they used force against the journalist. As a result, the video operator was injured into his head. So, first of all, responsible officials, the guards, if they work for some private interest, we can say that they do not understand that they do not protect the state at private events. At private events, they just protect private interests, not state or governmental interests. So both impunity and any sin is composed of details. Any changes, they are based on confidence, and we experience the crisis of confidence. And people in power, they can use this power, abuse this power. Our power, as we said, after 2014's revolution of dignity, we said that the people would come to power who are good ones, but they will take a mission to keep the democratic principles. But unfortunately, what time has passed since 2014? They now have not only the rights, but also the duties to be responsible, to be liable for their deeds. The initiatives should be focused on protecting journalists, but not on protecting private interests at the weddings of private individuals. We should have confidence as we have in developed democratic states, for example, like in Latvia, where there is an office for combating propaganda of Russian Federation. And they have confidence, and the officials in Latvia, they protect interests of the states, but not of private individuals. Thank you.
Бажаю взяти слово.
So who will be the next one? I would like to say several words. So everything that is envisaged by law and allowed by law is believed to be legal, and here the state understands this, why these legislative initiatives happen. So there should be rules established in legislative field, and very quickly, without any explanations, they implement these limitations, and post factum they discuss what was adopted already. But the state does not care whether you like it or not, whether you organize discussions, and this exists and is in action, and the state says that this is envisaged by law. That's why we adhere to legislation. And here there is an issue that those legislative initiatives that are directed to block internet resources, they should be discussed in the expert community and should be communicated properly. And if they do not meet international standards, they should be believed as such that cannot be adopted at the national level. And also we should understand that the legislation won't be able to come hand in hand. It will a little bit lag behind, and it shouldn't be lagging behind for 3 years and to respond post factum. So the specifying question, you've said that we should adhere to international experience. And what about this draft law? Does this draft law correspond, and can it deteriorate the position of Ukraine in the ratings where the situation is normal with the freedom of expression? So this situation deteriorated in several years, and in 10 years Ukraine is low in the rating, and we should think about it if we want to have an image and on the international arena. And speaking about this draft law, we believe that it is unacceptable, and this draft law envisages the introduction of such term as technological terrorism, and a big spectrum of action can be included there. So if there will be some criticism that contradicts national interests or worsens the image of Ukraine, that can be considered as technological terrorism. And if there is expression directed at decisions of NGOs or bodies of power, this can be also qualified according to this term. And this draft law envisages pre-trial blocking of resources up to 48 hours, and in today's conditions, in order to take important decisions, one signature is enough, not even 48 hours. And when we speak about 48 hours, society is ready to accept it, but today we do not know in what time it will be next, and it is difficult to go back and cancel such decisions, and we should pay attention to the opinion of the public and also the standards in the field. And at the level of UNO, this resolution is not binding. It was adopted in April 2016, and it says that any measures directed at blocking internet resources, they are unacceptable and shouldn't be used by the states. And also there is a big spectrum of documents that regulate the activity of journalists and other citizens in conditions of conflict, and it envisages that limitations should be grounded and proportional, and it should be communicated in the right way. And these legislative initiatives, they are registered after Supreme Council goes on vacation, and then it is discussed quickly. We believe that this should not be done like this. So they try to do everything in one day before holidays. And we would like to hear from Vadym about limitations in the sphere of freedom of opinion and expression. I cannot say about it now. I'm not an expert on this. And about the draft law, do you believe that this is proportional, non-proportional, whether it is grounded? Do we really need it? So we need some limitations. We cannot get rid of all the limitations. For example, in Russia, we can make a parallel. When you go to the territory of Russian Federation, you cannot watch Censornet and many other sites. And in many sites, they block those messages that they believe harm their national interests. So you there is also reference to laws, and it says that this is deleted because it contradicts the legislation. And not only in Russia, in many other countries, there is such a legal option. If something contradicts national security issues, it can be deleted. So in Kontakty and Odnoklassniki sites, I believe that this is right, that they are banned because this was the source of propaganda. And a lot of photos of Russian servicemen who are in Donbass in Russian uniform, our colleagues took these photos from Contact site. If something is blocked in my iPhone, I won't search for it. I'm not computer savvy. I won't spend my time in order to get access to the site. And my colleague said it correctly that there are some centers in different countries to counteract fake news. And here, if something is done, this is done by volunteers in expert community, not state sector. And the Ministry of Information Policy, they have a public council. I'm a member of this council, and the ministry should be more active in this field. And we shouldn't lag behind, and we should identify the most common facts, and we should explain to society that this is not true, and many people believe that this information is true, especially if it is provided in coma professionally, not aggressively. So, answering your question, limitations, they have all been introduced in different countries. We cannot get rid of them, but they should be grounded, and as Olga said, they should be properly discussed before introduction, and they should be discussed with the experts, general public, and the media, and should not be used as in fight with political opponents. This is what I wanted to say, Vyacheslav. You know, what is law, I would like to say. So this is the document, the rules of game we will live according to. So someone establishes the rule, and we live according to these rules. And the year before, previous year, I traveled to the Baltic states and visited the parliaments, and I saw how these proposals are made, how legislative initiatives are introduced, the discussion. And here, Olga and Vadym stressed that we won't speak about this draft law, but we speak about general situation. The rules of the game, those draft laws that become law, and then we have 100 or 200 or 500 amendments. So this is the result of not discussing the issues with experts, and this is a tragedy. And I believe that, first of all, civil society and the experts should provide initiative, and there is no other way. And they should make everything possible in order to make a quality law. And about limitations, as I said, the forbidden fruit is sweet, and from one side they are needed, but they should be really balanced in order not to cross the line and we should allow to speak openly. So we should change the procedure, and only after this we will see the quality in any draft law, in any manifestations. So we outlined the main points. I would like to say one thing for further discussion. They say that Ukraine should not turn in its methods into Russia, and Ukraine should act not symmetrically, but it should provide media literacy courses for the citizens and to monitor the professionalism of the journalists and the media outlets that are really popular and influence many people. So in order to have full freedom on the internet, at least in the status quo as it is now, are courses of media literacy enough? And can the state be the initiator of this in order to start this work? It's not enough. Let's be realistic. In Ukraine, we have 42 million people, according to state statistics. Out of this number, there is no proper figure, but at least 1/4 is abroad in Russia, Poland. The number is growing in Spain, Italy, and other countries. So this is one aspect. There is official data that about 20 million people of Ukrainian origin, so they also try to get information. So this is not realistic. I believe that here we should create the synergy of actions. The state should play a leading role. And openly, I would like to say that I have a concern about the Ministry of Information Policy. So there is only 25 people in the ministry, and I do not know what they can do. And the matter is not who the minister is, but the government and the parliament do not want to understand that this is really a sensitive issue. And I believe that the president should have the meeting of Security and Defense Council and would discuss the topic of defense of information area in Ukraine and how to counteract Russian influence, and and in Germany there are radical parties that are also in place. So. And there is a lot of propaganda that is going through different channels. Ukraine 24 This is a Russian channel, imagine this. So the brand, the Ukrainian brand, this is used in Russian propaganda. And one of the deputies said that he was in the hotel and he watched Ukraine 24, and there is a lot of anti-Ukrainian propaganda, and he revealed that this is actually a Russian channel. So the state and civil society and expert community and the journalists. So without the synergy of actions, it would be really difficult to achieve something. And I agree with what was said. We are losing completely in the fight for information space. And I would like to make an announcement. At 3:30 in Ukrinform, there will be a round table about information security and cyber security. If you have such a wish, you together with the Ministry of Information and the Information Council, we will have the representatives of the Parliament and the Deputy Minister of Information Policy and the powerful experts from the Cyber Police Department and those organizations who deal with this topic. So we should discuss this topic. We should try to promote this topic because we cannot lose forever. So, Olga, what should be the instruments of Ukraine to counteract propaganda? So it is difficult to provide the courses of media literacy to everyone, but we should start with some small groups of population, and then that would translate to others. And the main aspect is trust between the society and the state, because really we speak about national interests, but national interests is the interests of citizens of the country. So when we speak about these interests, we should ask the opinion of each of us and the opinion of NGOs and media community about how to rightly act in one or other situation. And in such conditions, society would trust the state to adopt legislative initiatives, and maybe there should be state policy that would be developed in considering technical components, because legislators, they see the concept, they see how they want to do this, but they lack understanding how technologically it will act, or they do not take into account this technological component. But this is really important. And when we say that this propaganda influences, and it influences the decisions we make and the views we form, at the same time we have a choice what resources to use, what sources to address to. We address to verified sources where we know information is of quality, confirmed by facts, and maybe there won't be such concern that population uses not correct information, and this should be done based on transparent dialogue between society and the state. Oleksandr, what is your opinion on this? You see, representatives of other sectors, interested parties, they say that something should be done. They criticize those legislative initiatives that appear. This is a test for maturity, readiness of the state to fight the threats. And they have shown that they can do it this way. If civil society, professional community, journalists, and business and private sector, if they won't say how it can be done better and won't jointly provide something more effective, this will be like the legislators propose. So if professionals can take responsibility, they can say We have better, more mature, efficient models how to resolve the situation. Let's meet at the round table and form them. The problem is there is no such a table, there is no a model of cooperation in the forming of such important aspects. Previously, this was not needed. We didn't have such threats and information didn't travel so fast. So now the challenge that we face, the state should implement constitution and laws and should defend the population, and it does it as it can. If you know how to do it better, they should take responsibility and propose these things. So I would like to say that there should be a model of the dialogue of cooperation, and there should be work on the most efficient decisions to counteract the threats we face. We should search the model for cooperation. We should form this institution. Vyacheslav, what is your opinion? I will be brief. You know, I believe that any instrument, any mechanism, if it is used by people such as politicians of the top echelons of power, we will face this problem. We should finally get united, and I agree with Oleksandr that we should find the platform to discuss the issues where we can provide arguments, and this should be constructive ideas, and it should be done at the round table. Everything else is in the hands of legislators. So the mechanism that is well prepared and discussed at the level of experts. And what we said, what we are lacking, we should provide information to society why this draft law, why it should look like this, how it will work, and what benefit will be to the people, and also only after this there should be an adoption of law. So if this algorithm is in place, so the quality of the law will be different and everything will change. And as Olga said, and you also stressed this, this is done before on the eve of the new year and right after the closure of this session, and they do this really quickly. And there was a practice when in such platforms they prepare proposals, and when this product goes to the parliament through the corridors of power, some parts, some proposals went missing, and then the product is made that they wanted to produce. So this is done like this, and there is no such a level of trust as they have abroad. And about people who watch such things, I would like to wish everyone to rightly analyze the information. Yes, we are provided with huge massive of information, and we should be ready to analyze it correctly and to help people who are near us and here there is great responsibility of the journalists who provide information, and also the responsibility of the power and civil society that should also respond and help. Thank you. So we have time for several short questions. If you have questions, please ask. Прошу.
Andrei Megel, Institute of Liberalism, one of the speakers, said about implementation and vaccination and antibiotics. How do you see the opportunity of basic information training for school children so that they have some preventive mechanisms when they listen to information, what to accept and what not to accept. As far as I know, the draft law has not been heard in the committee, and the legislation was violated and taken about legal entities. It was even abuse of titles. What the procedure should be in civilized democratic country. I would like to start with your second question. Verkhovna Rada has regulations, and if you believe that some regulation, some procedure has been violated, you should raise this issue. I'm not ready to comment on this issue because the content of legislative initiatives known to me, but how this draft law was debated publicly, I can't comment. It is hard for me. Any MP has the guaranteed by Constitution right for legislative initiative. He or she represents the people, the voters, and he or she can enter legislative initiative, submit a draft law. If it is inefficient, some other person can offer other draft law more efficient. For example, Ottoman Empire, it was, what country was in conflict, in military conflict with this empire? Russian Empire. So, if you learn the system of administrative organization of territorial management in Ottoman Empire and Tsar Russian Empire, they were identical. Moreover, the cavalry of Ottoman Empire had some privileges. One horseman was provided with a horse and uniform from one community on their account, and they sent this defender to protect them, to defend them. The same concerned horsemen in Russia, the Gussars, so-called historical name. If there is an aggression, you try to respond the same way as the aggressor acts. We can offer some better ways, but we should look for these better solutions. We have a chance to demonstrate that we are more mature and more smart. Your comment, please. Horsemen today are parliamentarians, and their Gussar role is like that they violate both regulations and even the constitution of Ukraine. Till they are acting this way, the lack of confidence will be present all over the country. I like this discussion mostly for that until the government and the society learn how to communicate and to hear each other. This problem of lack of confidence will continue. Of course, one discussion is too little for resolving this problem. Thank you to our audience and to our online audience.